I want to read you something directly from the Weather Prediction Center's extended forecast discussion published at 3:51 a.m. Eastern this morning. This is the government's official medium-range forecast analysis, and there is a specific phrase in here that stopped me cold when I read it. The WPC writes, and I'm quoting directly, that the system arriving this weekend is an anomalous upper low dropping southward across the northwestern states. Anomalous. That word has a specific, precise meaning in meteorology. It doesn't mean unusual. It doesn't mean above average. It means this system is behaving in a way that falls far outside of what the historical record considers normal for this time of year. And to put a number on just how far outside normal we're talking, the 00Z ECMWF model, the European model, the gold standard of global forecasting, is showing this upper low deepening below the 5 climatological percentile, the bottom half of 1% of all historical observations for late June. And here is what that anomalous upper low is going to do. It's going to drop southward through the northwest this weekend and then eject eastward into the plains. It's going to spawn surface cyclogenesis, a rapidly developing surface low right at the start of July. That surface low is going to pull mid to upper 60-degree dew points northward into the northern plains. The Storm Prediction Center already has severe storms flagged across the northern plains for Saturday. And by early next week, the Climate Prediction Center is flagging a heat index of 110 degrees Fahrenheit in southern Oklahoma and northern Texas, alongside a heavy precipitation risk from the eastern Dakotas into the Great Lakes. That is the collision this system is setting up. A rare, anomalous, bottom half of 1% upper low crashing into a July heat wave, triggering severe weather at the exact moment the season's attention should be shifting north. And it's all happening in the first week of July, the window when this country is historically least prepared for a major, severe weather outbreak. That is what this video is about. Let's go. It is Tuesday, June 24th, day 175 of 2026. And I want to give you a clear picture of where the atmosphere stands right now, because today's setup is the launching pad for what I'm going to be describing. Today, the SPC has a slight risk across portions of the central high plains through the southern plains. Severe thunderstorms capable of producing 2-inch plus diameter hail and 75 plus mile per hour gusts from southeastern Wyoming and eastern Colorado down through Kansas and into Oklahoma. And simultaneously across the east, a slight risk has been issued for southeast Virginia and eastern North Carolina, where scattered damaging winds are possible from storms developing along a lingering coastal boundary. 2 slight risks on opposite ends of the country on a Tuesday in late June. That is the baseline that this season has established. Active severe weather somewhere across the contiguous United States every single day, sometimes simultaneously in geographically separated regions. The WPC's short-range discussion, published at 2:55 a.m. Eastern this morning, is explicit about what the next few days look like. An active summertime weather pattern will maintain daily threats of scattered severe weather and flash flooding across parts of the central and south-central United States through mid to late week. A few slower-moving disturbances and frontal boundaries will interact with an abundance of Gulf moisture and instability, setting the stage for several organized clusters of thunderstorms. Several organized clusters every day through Thursday. So when I talk about what's coming this weekend into next week, I'm not talking about a single event emerging from a quiet atmosphere. I'm talking about a rare, anomalous upper-level system arriving on top of an already relentlessly active pattern. That's the compounding factor. That's why this deserves your attention right now, 3 to 4 days out. Let me spend real time on the atmospheric mechanics here, because this system is genuinely unusual, and the reason it's unusual explains exactly why it's capable of causing the problems I'm going to describe. At this point in the meteorological year, late June, early July, the northern hemisphere is at or approaching its maximum solar heating. The sun is high. The surface heats aggressively. The jet stream, which has been energetically active all spring, typically retreats northward into Canada as the summer heat builds. The large-scale atmospheric pattern becomes more dominated by ridges of high pressure, heat domes, and less dominated by the deep troughing that powers organized severe weather events. This seasonal transition is why tornado season is perceived as a spring phenomenon. It's not that tornadoes stop happening in July. It's that the atmospheric dynamics that produce organized, multi-storm severe weather outbreaks, the deep trough, the strong jet, the sharp wind shear, generally become less frequent and less intense as summer peaks. The atmosphere gets lazy. Thunderstorms happen every afternoon, but they're usually pulse storms, disorganized, driven by surface heating rather than synoptic dynamics. Now here's what makes the incoming system anomalous. The upper low that the WPC identified in their extended forecast discussion this morning is not a typical summertime feature. It is a cutoff low, a pool of cold air that has become separated from the main westerly flow at upper levels and is trapped, spinning anomalously deep for late June, positioned over the northwestern United States. Think of it as a piece of the winter atmosphere that got left behind when the jet stream retreated north. It doesn't belong there this time of year, and because it doesn't belong there, the atmosphere doesn't quite know what to do with it. What it's going to do, based on the model consensus that the WPC and SPC are relying on, is drop southward into the Rockies and then eject eastward across the plains over the weekend. And as it does, it's going to interact with the surface in a way that is, again, more typical of April than late June. The NWS Lincoln, Illinois wrote that exact phrase about the June 17th outbreak. This type of synoptic pattern is more typical of April rather than June. And what they were describing was the same atmospheric architecture, a deep, anomalous upper trough producing unusually strong mid and upper level winds that is now being modeled for the late June into early July period. This is the heart of why the word rare belongs in this video's title. Not because severe weather in July is unusual, it's not, but because a synoptic scale April-like atmospheric setup arriving in the first week of July below the zero. 5, climatological percentile in terms of upper level depth, is genuinely anomalous. It's the kind of setup that produces outsized impacts precisely because the month on the calendar creates a false sense of security. Let me walk you through the timeline, starting with Saturday. The SPC's day 4/8 convective outlook, issued yesterday morning at 3:47 a.m. Central, has already flagged severe weather potential across the northern plains for Saturday. Here's what the discussion says. The strong mid-level trough moves into the northwest on Saturday, with strong mid-level flow extending around the base of that trough. The leading edge of that stronger mid-level flow emerges over the northern plains Saturday, with a lee cyclone, a surface low developing in the lee of the Rocky Mountains, forecast near the Montana-South Dakota-Wyoming border. Moderate to strong instability is forecast to develop as mid to upper 60-degree dew points advect northward. Strong to severe storms are expected during the afternoon and evening as the lead shortwave trough emerges and the low-level jet strengthens. Let me translate that from technical language into what it means on the ground. A surface low is going to develop east of the Rockies in the classic position, near the Montana-South Dakota-Wyoming border on Saturday afternoon. That surface low is the engine. It draws Gulf moisture northward into the northern plains, generating the warm, humid air that fuels thunderstorms. It creates a dry line or warm front that acts as the trigger for storm initiation, and it generates low-level wind shear, as the air flowing into the low from the south interacts with the atmospheric dynamics of the developing trough above it. The result? Scattered to numerous severe thunderstorms across portions of Montana, Wyoming, the Dakotas, and Nebraska Saturday afternoon and evening. The SPC has already placed 15% probability contours on this area, enough confidence at 4 to 5 days out to add those probabilities with the explicit acknowledgement that they'll need to shift timing and location as more data comes in. The cities in my primary focus for Saturday: Bismarck, Minot, Rapid City, Pierre, North Platte. This is the classic late June into July Northern Plains severe weather geography that AccuWeather's seasonal outlook specifically highlighted. The seasonal focus shifting north toward Nebraska, the Dakotas, Minnesota, and the Great Lakes. And the Northern Plains is exactly where this is going to begin. Now here's where this gets more complex and frankly more dangerous, and I want to make sure you understand both sides of this, because they're happening simultaneously across different parts of the country. While the anomalous upper low is driving severe weather across the northern plains over the weekend, the pattern downstream, to the east and south of that trough, is building something else entirely. The WPC's extended forecast discussion this morning explicitly states that in response to the incoming trough, a building downstream upper ridge across the east-central United States will result in increasing heat and humidity going into next week. The Climate Prediction Center's probabilistic hazards outlook, which looks out into week 2, is already flagging a significant heat event for the period of June 30th through July 6th. And the numbers are striking. A slight risk of extreme heat is designated for much of the Great Plains, the lower and middle Mississippi Valley, the Ohio and Tennessee valleys, the Gulf Coast states, the Southeast, and the Mid-Atlantic. That is a massive geographic footprint. And within that broad area, temperatures of at least 100 degrees Fahrenheit are forecast across a wide region, with heat index values around 105. For southern Oklahoma and adjacent northern Texas, the CPC's bias-corrected heat tool is showing heat index values that may reach 110 degrees Fahrenheit, a 110-degree heat index on the 4th of July weekend, across a large portion of the south-central United States. And here is the specific collision that I want you to understand. That heat wave is going to be spreading east and south out of the plains, while the severe weather threat, generated by the anomalous upper low and the associated cold front, is simultaneously tracking south and east across the same region. This is the classic late June into July setup where the threat zone for tornadoes and damaging winds and the threat zone for dangerous heat exist simultaneously, separated by a sharp frontal boundary, and that boundary is exactly where the most intense weather happens. People in front of the boundary, in the heat, are dealing with 100-plus degree temperatures and 110-degree heat indices. People in the active, severe weather zone along the boundary are dealing with tornadoes, large hail, and derecho scale winds. And people behind the boundary are experiencing rapid temperature drops of 20, 30, even 40 degrees in some cases over a matter of hours. This is not a single threat event. It is a compound event that will hit different communities in entirely different ways simultaneously. I want to spend specific time on the derecho threat, because it's the hazard most associated with exactly this kind of July setup, and it's the one I think carries the greatest risk for the largest number of people. AccuWeather's 2026 summer forecast, published in May, made a specific and important statement about July and August, the rising risk of destructive lines of thunderstorms known as derechos. AccuWeather described them as sometimes called inland hurricanes because of the widespread wind damage they can cause, with winds that can exceed 100 miles per hour. Strong enough to flatten cornfields and trigger power outages that last for days in the summer heat. A derecho in late June or early July carries a specific compounding danger that a spring derecho does not. It's not just the wind damage, it's the heat that follows it. When a July derecho knocks out power to hundreds of thousands or millions of people, and a well-organized July derecho absolutely can, those people wake up without air conditioning in an environment where temperatures are running at 95 to 100 plus degrees. For healthy adults, that's a miserable several days of power restoration. For elderly people, for people with heat-sensitive medical conditions, for people who don't have family checking on them, that is a potentially life-threatening situation that develops with very little public visibility very quickly. We've already seen this season how a derecho can emerge from a seemingly well-forecast severe weather event and still catch communities off guard. The June 10th derecho that struck northern Illinois, formerly classified by the NWS as a derecho, produced wind gusts of 80 to 85 miles per hour and widespread wind damage across much of northern Illinois, with a brief EF0 tornado as well. That happened on a day when the pattern was understood and watches were issued. The storm still produced widespread power outages and significant infrastructure damage. The late June into early July system I'm describing today carries derecho potential in a different and, in some ways, more dangerous environment, because it's intersecting with a heat wave on the downstream side. A derecho-scale power outage event inside a 100-plus degree heat wave is not just a weather event. It is a public health event. And it is a possibility that anyone in the central United States needs to understand and prepare for right now. I'm going to say this again because the flooding message has been the consistent through line of this entire season, and that has not changed. The WPC's extended forecast discussion this morning is headlined with two priorities: additional heavy rain for the Midwest and Ohio Valley, and heat and humidity increases across the central and southern U.S. The heavy rain component is explicit, and it is prominent. The Day 4, excessive rainfall outlook, covering Saturday, June 27th, already has a slight risk of excessive rainfall across parts of the Ohio Valley and into the central Appalachians. And the Day 4-8 discussion notes a heavy precipitation risk from the eastern Dakotas eastward across the upper and middle Mississippi Valley and adjacent western Great Lakes region from June 30th through July 2nd. Here is why that matters more now than it would have mattered in April. The watersheds targeted by this precipitation are the same ones that have been receiving repeated heavy rainfall inputs throughout June: the Ohio River tributaries, the upper Mississippi Basin, the Missouri River Network, the Illinois River. These systems have been running above normal for weeks. River gauges across the Ohio Valley and the central Midwest are elevated. The ground is saturated. When a fresh round of 2 to 4 inches of rainfall, or locally heavier amounts in the most convective cores, lands on already saturated soils draining into already elevated rivers, the hydrological response is dramatically faster and dramatically larger than the rainfall totals alone would suggest. Flash flooding will occur at lower rainfall thresholds than normal. Rivers will crest higher and faster. Urban drainage systems that have been repeatedly stressed all month are going to be pushed to their limits again. And there is an additional agricultural dimension here that I want to flag specifically for anyone farming in the upper Midwest and Great Lakes region. The CPC's discussion notes that this area typically receives 30 to 40% of its annual precipitation during the summer, largely from mesoscale convective system activity and passing fronts. That precipitation is described as very beneficial to agriculture, but after the month we have had, with repeated rounds of heavy rainfall, the MCS and frontal precipitation that is forecast for late June into early July is arriving on ground that cannot absorb it at the normal rate. The beneficial summer rainfall window has been front-loaded and stressed, and the risk of localized flash flooding and standing water in fields, which directly damages crops, is elevated. I want to spend a moment on something that weather forecasters talk about internally, but that doesn't get enough public attention: the 4th of July preparedness gap. The 4th of July holiday weekend is statistically one of the highest risk periods for weather-related casualties in the United States. Not because the weather is historically more extreme during the first week of July, it isn't particularly, but because of what people are doing during that week. More Americans are outdoors on the 4th of July weekend than almost any other time of the year. They're at lakes, at rivers, on boats, at campgrounds, in parks, at outdoor concerts and festivals and fireworks events. They're away from their homes, in unfamiliar locations, often without their normal weather monitoring habits. Cell coverage can be spotty at campgrounds and rural recreation areas. People are focused on celebration, not radar. And the cultural expectation of summer safety, the assumption that July is warm and benign, creates a cognitive bias that makes people less responsive to weather warnings than they would be in April or May. When a rare, anomalous bottom half of 1% upper low produces April and July severe weather across the northern plains and Midwest during the 4th of July weekend, the population caught in that setup is not the same population that was mentally prepared and weather aware during the June outbreak season. It's a population that is on vacation, at the lake, at the fireworks show, and not thinking about tornado watches. This is the preparedness gap that this specific event exploits. And closing that gap requires talking about it before it opens, which is exactly why I'm making this video today, on Tuesday, June 24th, rather than on Saturday when the first storms are already firing. Let me be specific and practical, because that's what this channel is for. If you're planning any outdoor activity, travel, camping, or lake time for the 4th of July weekend, build a weather check into your planning right now. Go to your local NWS office's website and bookmark it. Check the Day 3 7 Hazards Outlook from the WPC, which is available at WPC. NOAA.gov. As we get into Thursday and Friday, the SPC's Day 1 and Day 2 outlooks will give you the most precise picture of where Saturday's severe weather risk is focused. Do not finalize your outdoor plans without checking these products. If you are in the northern plains, the Dakotas, Montana, Nebraska, Minnesota, for the weekend, Saturday is your first active day. The SPC already has probabilities posted. Know your shelter at every outdoor location you plan to be at this weekend. Know how you get weather warnings when you're at a campground or a lake where cell service may be intermittent. A battery-powered NOAA weather radio is not just a suggestion for this weekend, it's essential equipment for anyone planning to be away from reliable cell coverage during an active severe weather setup. If you are in the Central Plains and Southern Midwest for the 4th of July week, the heat wave building behind the cold front is going to be serious. The CPC's heat index projections, 105 plus degrees broadly, 110 in parts of southern Oklahoma and northern Texas, are for an extended multi-day event. Have your cooling plan ready. Know where cooling centers are in your area if you lose power. Check on elderly neighbors and family members before the heat arrives, not after. Power outage preparation. If a derecho scale event hits the Midwest early next week inside a heat wave, which is a real documented possibility based on the atmospheric setup I've described today, power could be out for an extended period in affected areas during extreme heat. Charge everything now. Have a battery backup charged. If you have a generator, make sure it's fueled and that you know the outdoor-only safety rules. Cash, flashlights, a battery-powered fan, and ice for cooler are not excessive preparations for this setup. They are common sense. Flash flood specific. For anyone in the Ohio Valley, the upper Mississippi Basin, or anywhere along river systems that have already flooded this month, know your river gauge. Check it before the weekend rain arrives. If your river is running at or near minor flood stage right now, another 2 to 4 inches from Saturday's storms could push it to moderate or major flooding. Know your evacuation trigger and your route out before the rain starts. Here is what I want you to take from this video. The Weather Prediction Center called this incoming system anomalous. The ECMWF is placing it below the 5 climatological percentile. The NWS used the phrase more typical of April rather than June to describe similar atmospheric architecture when it struck on June 17th. And this system is arriving during the 4th of July weekend, the single highest outdoor recreation holiday of the American calendar, when tens of millions of people are away from home, at lakes and campgrounds and fireworks shows, with their weather guard down. That is a rare atmospheric event arriving at a rare moment of collective inattention. And the combination of those two things, not either one individually, is what makes this concerning. The SPC's Day 4-8 discussion is already flagging the northern plains for Saturday. The WPC's extended forecast discussion is already calling out the heavy rain risk for the Midwest and Ohio Valley. The CPC is already flagging the heat wave for June 30th through July 6th. These are not speculative model runs. These are the government's operational forecasters with their names and offices attached, telling you what they see in the data. I'm going to be back Thursday or Friday with updated outlooks as the model resolution sharpens on the weekend and early week timing. Subscribe and turn on notifications if you want those updates as they come, because in a setup like this, the 24 to 48 hour window is when everything gets sharper and actionable. Don't be scared. Be prepared. The 4th of July is supposed to be a celebration. Make sure you have the information you need to keep it that way. I'll see you in the next one. Stay safe.